Nigeria's inflation figures rise to 13.71% in September. World Bank to provide over 50 billion US dollars in grants to most fragile countries. IMF's chief Kristalina says China's recovery is good for global recovery. Nigerian auditors affirm support to the country's anti-corruption fight, plus federal government opens portal for 75 billion Naira Nigeria Youth Investment Fund application. Details of these and more on Business Express reaching you from Abuja, Nigeria's capital. And I am Leah Katungbaba today. The federal government says it has opened the portal for eligible and interested Nigerians to access the 75 billion Naira Youth Investment Fund. The Nigerian Youth Investment Fund was set up as an initiative of the Federal Ministry of Youth and Sports Development and funded by the Central Bank of Nigeria to invest in youth ideas to build sustainable businesses that can activate enterprise and increase job opportunities. The fund is dedicated to investing in innovative ideas, skills, and talents of Nigerian youths aimed at turning them to entrepreneurs, wealth creators, and employers of labor that are contributing to national development. The plan targets young people between the ages of 18 and 35 and details the needed action required to support business establishments, expansions, and consequent employment creation for youth in critical economic and social sectors. Latest figures released this morning by the National Bureau of Statistics (NBS) shows that Nigeria's inflation increased by 13.71% year-on-year in September 2020. This indicates a 0.49% increase from the rate recorded in August 2020, which was 13.22%. On a month-on-month basis, the headline index increased by 1.48% in September 2020. This is 0.14% above the 1.34% recorded in August. Urban inflation went up by 14.31% from 13.83% recorded previously, while rural inflation rose to 13.14% from 12.65% in August. On a month-on-month basis, the urban index rose by 1.56% in September 2020, up by 0.14% from 1.42% recorded in August. The rural index also rose by 1.4%. The World Bank has made some commitments to protect the global economy from shocks occasioned by coronavirus. President of the World Bank Group, David Malpass, at the ongoing annual meetings of the IMF and World Bank disclosed that the bank is calling for $25 billion in further COVID-19 emergency financing to help the world's poorest countries grapple with the massive challenges of the global pandemic. The World Bank's emergency health response to COVID-19 has so far seen $6.6 billion invested in 111 countries to help them contain the pandemic and ensure access to preventive and essential health, water and sanitation services. It further approved $12 billion for purchase of COVID-19 vaccines and treatment. President of the World Bank Group, David Malpass, has applauded reform measures put in place by Nigeria to ward off economic concerns further exacerbated by COVID-19. Speaking at the annual meetings of the IMF and the World Bank Wednesday, Malpass applauded Nigeria for doing away with subsidies and deliberate efforts to bridge infrastructure gaps and tackle corruption headlong.
Nigeria, vital steps are to strengthen the health system and the education system, and we try to work in those areas. Also, the governance system and the transparency are vital in order to reduce the corruption within the system. We've also worked, and I think I compliment Nigeria for tackling the problem of subsidies in the hydrocarbon area. It's by reducing those subsidies and frankly allowing gasoline prices to rise. It's very hard for governments to do that, but it has substantial benefits. It means that there's fiscal savings. It also means that there's environmental benefits that are large, and it also allows markets to work better and to allocate resources better. So I think progress is being made in that area, and it's
Now, this morning we shall be examining the commitments by the World Bank and IMF to global recovery in the wake of coronavirus-inspired recession. What are the issues before Africa and Nigeria? I have Paul Alaji joining me from Lagos. He is an economist with SPM Professionals. He is joining us via telephone. Welcome to Business Express, Mr. Paul.
Good morning. Thank you so very much for having me.
Okay, great. Now, the president of the World Bank has aligned with the federal government's fiscal position on repositioning the economy. Just yesterday, he applauded efforts from health to education and energy, where subsidies now gone. How do you see these steps playing out in the recovery path?
Well, it's a good news. One of the things World Bank and IMF had mentioned is for Nigerian government and indeed beyond Nigeria, African government to consider critical sector. And health and education are very critical, not just because we use them to measure human development index, we also use them to know what human capital is, particularly when you remove income, you have what human capital index is. And if the human capital of the country is not good and human development is not significantly improving, you cannot say the country is moving towards development. So I think Nigeria and other African countries have been given the best advice regarding what they could do to become better. And it did not just stop there. In fact, before the close of business yesterday, G20 had also announced, in line with what World Bank is saying, a bit of debt repayment postponement by another 6 months till June, particularly facilities that are due to G20. So for me, I could also notice that there is a slight improvement in what the government has allocated to education. Even though I was expecting more, but this little is noticeable.
Okay, now the annual meetings seem to have one direction. I want to take this question before we come back to debt repayment. Wiping the virus off the face of the earth, but inequality seems to be a serious concern for the IMF and the World Bank as the gap is further widened by this pandemic. Especially in Africa, we've seen a lot of people fall into the poverty region. What would be your view on this scenario?
Well, the pandemic has dealt with many countries seriously. South Africa had a huge number of negative growth, that's contraction. South Africa has been in recession, I think, from the first quarter or second quarter of this year already. In China, I beg your pardon, Ghana is struggling as an economy, but Nigeria, which is our primary concern, also has minus 6.10% GDP growth rate. So when you consider the issue of poverty, what the world is expecting is over 700 million people to join poverty line, and government of Nigeria as well as other African countries must do more in terms of transfer payment and also creating fresh opportunity, aligning with private sector to get people off the hook. I understand the Nigerian government is looking at 70,000 Nigerians from local government to local government. You recall that President Buhari has given that mandate to the Ministry of Employment, Labor and Employment and Productivity to ensure they get more and more young people under direct employment for a number of months. So that said, yes, we are going to see some level of engagement from youth. But for me, what World Bank and IMF is referring to is sustainability of some of these policies. And they have also mentioned that we need to spend ourselves out of the current economic quagmire. We need to spend ourselves of this virus economy that is caused by the coronavirus. So, and what are the suggestions? I think state government, for instance, we need to spend not less than 50% of the allocation, and this will extend to federal government. State and federal government must spend not less than 50% of the total 2021 budget on capex, and that is capital expenditure. And this must be sustainable for minimum of 2 years before we can say we'll significantly reduce poverty. If not, if we continue with the current 20 to 30% allocation, and some states allocate just 20% in some of the places, with the huge debts they have to finance for the state to continue to survive, I am sorry, we might not be able to. And this is not unique to Nigeria. The same with some other African countries, particularly within the West African sub-region. A lot of states have a lot of burden on them because of coronavirus. Apart from even repayment of debt, funds that would have gone to other sectors, we now need to go to health sector so that African countries, particularly Nigeria in this instance, can be properly positioned to respond in case there is another outbreak in the coming period.
Okay, now still on this response, now the World Bank president yesterday suggested countries, when he was speaking particularly about Nigeria, countries should put their post-COVID-19 direction, which will be very difficult from the pre-COVID-19. They should decide what they want for themselves. Now, is Africa and particularly Nigeria ready for a post-COVID economy?
Well, the reality is that post-COVID economy is WWW, which people call World Wide Web. But our organization has tagged a world without walls. In post-COVID economy, we run more on data. And we need to talk about data penetration in Nigeria today, because that's the reality of coming period. A post-COVID economy, we have will be less dependent on natural resources, particularly crude oil. Nigeria to be ready and become participatory in the post-COVID economy must transform the economy from the current primary crude oil and agrarian economy to one that is manufacturing driven and service driven. Particularly, manufacturing component of our GDP must grow from this meager 10% to not less than 40%. I understand it's not going to be done in 2 or 3 or 4 years, but that plan, and that is why I'm happy the president is putting up together a team to look at national development plan. This development plan must be a rolling plan. Rolling plan has never helped us since we adopted it in the 90s. We need to come up with a national development plan and state clearly how we want to build rail to connect the country together the way it used to be in the 60s and 70s. What method are we going to use to generate revenue? So, irrespective of who comes to government, whatever political party is, whatever religion is, whatever the belief is, whatever region the person comes from, whatever the ethnic group, because we have a national development plan, Nigeria can grow in that line. India practices it and is working. China is practicing it, is working. America has similar documents, is working. Rwanda, an East African country, are joined countries that are planned for 2050 and is working. I hope Nigeria will do due diligence.
Now, Paul, let me just come in here. Interestingly, the IMF is seeing a better 2021 for Nigeria from 5.9% a few months ago. Nigeria this year, that was the prediction, now to 4.3% just 2 days back. What are they seeing on our behalf that we are not seeing? If we're saying that the economy is already affected and the global recovery might not be so good by the end of the year into next year. Now they had a scenario which was bad, but now it's been further revised and it's a bit, I would say, better from what was the scenario at the beginning of this pandemic.
Clearly so. When you want to compare a child that is sick to a child that is recovering, from what I've seen, and based on our own analysis and projection in SPM, the worst Nigeria could be in this recession is minus 6.1%. What you are going to see is gradual recovery, and that is why IMF is looking at what the revised position. Recall that when they had that very low negative projection for Nigeria, Nigeria was in the middle of the pandemic, and the lockdowns still ate sway to a large extent. And those were the parameters for the pandemic. Again, at that time, global crude oil price was not up to $40 per barrel. So when we say $40 per barrel, there could be crisis in many major of the oil-producing countries, which will significantly reduce supply. And when supply, if demand remains the same, price will significantly jump. Once it jumps, it will have impact on our foreign reserves. It will have impact on our revenue generation. It will have impact on our FX, which means Nigeria can actually recover if variable we cannot adjust all the crude oil sales and the prices and revenue that come from all of those is positively adjusted. That said, if other things remain equal the way they have today, definitely before the end of 2021, things might not be as we had it before COVID, but things will definitely improve more than what we have today.
Okay, Paul, can I just come in here now? Inflation figures came out this morning and we recorded 1.48% month on month, the rise. What were your expectations, higher numbers or lower numbers?
Well, we have been expecting higher numbers. When you look at the demand side, demand has increased. Not all supply has gone back to work. Food crisis ravages the northern part, which of course is the major food basket of the nation, from Kogi up to Sokoto and Borno. We all know the insecurity we've been battling with in the country, in different parts of the country, particularly the core northern states, northwest and northeast, and the pockets of insecurity we have also in the north center. And that is why I think all of us must put our hands together to support authority and to speak against the ongoing insecurity in the country. Again, the figures might even increase in the coming period as most of Nigerian youth continue to take to streets in the name of NSAS protest. So my advice for authority is to quickly answer the angry youth and see how they can pacify them so that we can return to normalcy.
Okay, so Paul, before I let you go now, I would want to take this other question on debt restructuring. I had pointed it out to you earlier. The IMF's chief, Christina Georgieva, called for more participation in debt relief for poor countries by private creditors in China. What will be your position on this quickly, just before I let you go?
My position is that China, who is perhaps the second largest creditor to Africa, should give Africa not less than 2 years. The impact of COVID-19 will remain with us for not less than 2 years. Not just that, other multilateral organizations have given facilities to nations within Africa, whose economy has been affected the most. Remember, COVID-19 is like a thief. A thief comes but to steal, to kill, and to destroy. The impact might not be the numbers of death in Africa, but the impact is on the economy that is being destroyed in Africa. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Paul, for those scriptural inspirations this morning. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so very much for having me.
Thank you. Now moving on, Nigerians have been going above board in the war against coronavirus to keep the economy going. Let's hear this inspiring testimony on surviving COVID-19.
I'm one of the beneficiaries of the CBN loan that was given to me. I applied for 10 million and it was released. I'm actually into branding and printing. I acquired this machine to achieve this purpose. And of course, work is going on and my life is better. I'm so happy for the impact that the CBN has done to me. I want to thank the boss of CBN. As a result of this loan, I'm able to employ. Currently, we are 4 staffs running, 1 in the graphics section, 1 in the DI section, another 1 in the production section. So we are doing well.
Nigerian auditors have affirmed their support to the country's anti-corruption fight to ensure the sustainability of ongoing reforms. Auditor General of the Federation, Anthony Ayine, said this when he met with Conference of Auditors General for local governments and area councils in Nigeria in his office, adding that they would continue to play their role in promoting transparency and accountability.
So I will urge all of us at all levels to ensure that we support the entrenchment of transparency and accountability and the fight against corruption. And how do we do this? By upping up our game. Our assurance to you is that this process will continue in the interest of our country.
Main reason for our appellation, which is to ensure that resources deployed to the government from public funds, monetary and fiscal policy of the nation are optimally harnessed and judiciously utilized to provide basic amenities of life, has been accomplished.
The dollar and yen drew support on Thursday's rising coronavirus cases and scant progress towards a U.S. stimulus deal unsettled investors, while the Australian dollar hit a one-week low after the central bank chief hinted at easing to come. Let's now see how the naira is exchanging for other international currencies. Gold prices fell on Thursday, weighed by a steady dollar and fading chances of a new U.S. fiscal stimulus package being finalized before the November elections. Now, stocks in Nigeria have been affected by consumer apathy in the first 3 days of this week. The stocks have been trading on the downside and, of course, have resumed this morning still on the downside. Away from home, stocks in Asia Pacific were mostly lower on Thursday trade, while shares of K-pop superstars BTS label Big Hit Entertainment surged on the first trading day of the week. Over to Boss Table for details.
European stocks fell sharply on Thursday, the 15th of October, as hopes fade that a U.S. stimulus package will be agreed before the November election, and as restrictions returned across Europe due to a surge in coronavirus infection. U.S. stock futures were lower on Wednesday night, which also affected early trade of Thursday as traders continue to weigh the prospect for a coronavirus aid deal being reached before next month's elections. Dow Jones Industrial Average futures were down 107 points. S&P 500 futures and Nasdaq 100 futures also traded in negative territory. Asia stocks are still bleeding in early trading as investors continue to react to President Xi Jinping's speech. Nikkei lost 0.51%, Shanghai Composite 0.26%, and the Hang Seng Index also depreciated 1.69%, while Africa stocks resumed trade mixed, with Tunisia's Tunidex, Ghana's GSE Composite, and Namibia's overall index posting gains. Boss De Able, Business Express.
And this brings us to the end of this edition of Business Express. We value your feedback, so keep the comments, observations, and suggestions coming. Be informed that all previous episodes are available on YouTube on the NTA's channel. You can also communicate with us on Twitter, and the handle is NTA News Now. Don't forget to use the hashtag #BizX. Remember to intermittently wash your hands with soap and the running water as the world battles COVID-19. Be safe out there. Business Express returns a Friday at 3 p.m. I'm Leah Katun. Baba Tunde.